everyone, it's Gina K from Gina K Designs, and I'm so excited to be back on the Simon Says Stamp blog and YouTube channel. Today I'm going to show you a fun technique that combines some background stamps and a little bit of bleach to create a focal image that pops. Let me show you the tools and products you're going to need to do this technique. First, you're going to need some stamps, and I have a few Gina K Designs mini stamp sets here. I have Doodle Sayings, I have You Make Me Smile, and Rose Bouquet. Then I have a couple of our background stamps. I have the diagonal stripe, I have the gauze, and the rose lace. Now, I'm not going to use all of these in my demo today, but I am going to show you some samples where I've used them. I'm also going to use some of the Gina K Designs Fine Detail Black Embossing Powder. I'm also going to use an embossing magic pad. For inks, I'm using some of the Lucky Clover, some Blue Lagoon, some black amalgam ink, and I'm using a Versamark pad. I'm also going to be using a water brush, but instead of putting water in it, I'm just going to dip the tip into bleach. And I like to keep an extra water brush on hand just for bleaching techniques. I'm going to use my tidy towel, and I have a little container here that's filled with some Clorox bleach. Now, I recommend that you use bleach that's fresh. If you have bleach that's been sitting in your cabinet for a while, it's time to pick up a new bottle because this technique's going to work a lot better with fresh bleach. Okay, so to begin, I have a piece of cardstock here that I've cut to 3 3/4 by 3 3/4, and I'm going to use the diagonal stripe background stamp. Now, all our background stamps come on cling cushion, and you can use them with a MISTI or a stamping block, whatever you want, but I'm going to put mine right down here just on my mat because I like to stamp background stamps with the stamp facing up looking at me. I'm going to start with some Blue Lagoon ink, and I'm going to ink up this background stamp. Now, my mat's a little bit sticky, so it sits really nicely on here, but if your mat is very slippery, you can always put your background stamp right on the top of your MISTI because the MISTI has a plastic cover on it. You can also use a Big Shot plate or a Cuttlebug plate for that. Okay, so now I'm going to take that piece of cardstock and I'm going to lay it right down onto the background stamp like that. And then I have a piece of scrap paper that I'm going to put on top, and I'm just going to rub over the entire surface of this to transfer the ink to the paper. This makes it a lot easier for me. I have a little bit of trouble getting good stamping with big background stamps because I'm just not as strong as I used to be, but this makes it a lot easier for me. Okay, and now I'm going to flip that, and you can see I've got the diagonal stripes. Now I am going to clean this stamp using my tidy towel just to get most of that ink off of there before I add another color. Now, the tidy towel is a great way to clean your stamps. You can just rinse it with water and it's ready to go. If they get too dirty, you can throw them right into your washer and they'll clean up your stamps with just water. But you can use stamp cleaner if you prefer. Okay, so now my next color is going to be the Lucky Clover. So I'm going to ink that up. I haven't moved the stamp at all. And I'm going to ink that up with Lucky Clover. Really get that nice and inky. Now, I had originally stamped my stamp this way. I'm going to turn it a 1/4 turn, and I'm going to lay it down onto that background stamp, and once again, put that piece of scrap paper on top, and rub all over the surface again of that piece of paper. And I'm just holding it down with my other hand so the paper doesn't shift under there. Okay. And there we go. Now we have a cute little plaid crisscross pattern using the Lucky Clover ink and the Blue Lagoon. And you can do this with a variety of colors in your collection, and they all look so cute. So now this is going to be our backdrop for our focal image. So I'm going to take my heat tool and I'm just going to dry that ink for a couple seconds because I want to make sure that it's not wet or it's going to grab the embossing powder, and I don't want it to do that. Now this is dye ink and it does dry instantly, but there might be a little bit of wetness in there that could grab some embossing powder. So just to be doubly safe, I'm just going to use the heat tool just to make sure it's completely dry. It's certainly not smearable, but you can kind of feel that it has soaked into the paper a little bit, and I want it to be really dry before I emboss. All right, so my next step is I'm going to get one of these pretty stamps, one of these pretty flower stamps. For this card, I'm going to use the Rose Bouquet, and then I'm going to use the Embossing Magic Pad, and I'm going to rub that all over the surface of this cardstock. That's going to really ensure that I don't get any static on the cardstock, and embossing powder is only going to stick to where I want it. And then I'm going to put it up in the top corner here. Just put a magnet on that. And then I'm going to position this where I want. I want a little bit of it hanging off of the corner. So I think I'll put it right about there. And I'm going to pick that up like that. Get that back into position. Now I'm going to ink this up with some Versamark. You can see I'm already getting inky. My fingers are turning blue and green. That's a sign of good production, good stamping production when your fingers start to get inky. Okay, so now I'm going to stamp that onto my cardstock. I'm going to move this magnet out of the way. Let's put it over here and stamp that again. Okay. Now I'm going to get a piece of scrap paper and some of the fine detail black embossing powder, and I'm going to sprinkle that over my image. You can see the image there peeking through. All right. And now I'm going to use my embossing tool. Let me get rid of this embossing powder. And then I'm going to heat that design. All right. This is a very, very fine, detailed design, so it heats up very quickly. There we go. Okay, so I want to make sure that's all embossed. And now comes the magic part. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take this little bit of bleach that I have and my water brush, and I'm going to dip that into the bleach, and I'm going to start to color the roses. Now the embossing powder holds everything in place so that the bleach doesn't seep outside the lines. But when you do this, especially on fresh inked cardstock like this, that rose just starts to pop right off the page. So I'm sure you've seen bleaching on cardstock before, but possibly you haven't tried bleaching ink. And this is really a fun technique. So now you can have your images shining through with all of this neat background stamping behind it. And you can see how all of the images now are starting to, that I've bleached, are starting to really turn white. You do see a little bit of the pattern in there, which is kind of neat because that's an effect that you really can't get any other way. And depending on the colors that you use, these are very vibrant colors. So if you're using a much softer color, maybe some pastels, it might completely bleach out to white. It just depends on the ink and how saturated it is with color. And these are pretty easy to color in because, like I said before, ooh, that was a little bloppy. I'm going to put that over there. That had a little air bubble in it. But they're easy to color in because most of the bleach is contained inside the lines because the lines raise up a little bit from being embossed. And the fun thing is, I mean, you don't have to worry about shading or anything else. You're really just pulling color off. So when you get to the big parts of the flower, you know, you can just really rub your brush over the whole thing. There's not a lot of fine detail work here, but it's such an interesting look. Now, if you do this with older bleach, that may be a fun thing to try if you do have old bleach, because it might not bleach up quite as much, so you might have a softer plaid design behind the bold plaid design. So it's worth a try if you've got it. Give it a shot and see what it looks like. All right, so just a few more little images here. I have a stem. Sometimes it's hard to see the images and where all the leaves are and everything, so I had to actually look at the picture on the stamp set because the plaid is so busy. But that picture on the stamp set then shows you exactly what you need to bleach out. Just a little bit more. And we'll get that stem. You can see that's all starting to come up now. You can see I did go a little outside the lines there with my blob, but just be a little bit more careful and you won't have that problem. You can always go back with a regular paintbrush with your ink and just touch that up too. So now you can hit that with a heat tool to get it to come up a little whiter or a little faster. And the smell of the bleach, once it's dry, it dissipates and you don't even smell it anymore. Okay, so now I'm going to add a greeting, and I think I'm going to use one of the greetings from the Doodle Saying stamp set. I'm just going to use a little block here, and I think I will use the Been Thinking About You. I've been thinking about you. And I'm using one of the Gina K Designs blocks. You can see this has quite a grid on it. So no matter how small your design is, you can really get it straight on the block. Okay. And then I'll stamp that right up here. There we go. I've been thinking about you. And then with the amalgam ink, it's a good idea to just clean your block or clean your stamp right away. This has been stamped with VersaFine too, so it is a little stained, but the amalgam ink will come right off your block. Okay, so now I have a couple other pieces of cardstock here. I'm going to assemble this card. I have some of the black onyx, and once I tape that down, that's going to all flatten out. I'm using a little ThermoWeb sticky dot runner here. My favorite style of tape. I love the dots. And then this whole panel is going to go onto a white card base. There we go. And so there is my finished card project. And isn't that cool how that background just goes right to the edge? I don't even think you could get it as clean if you masked it because it's all like caught into these tiny little areas, and you when you mask, you have like a little raised part there, and it doesn't always get right to the edge like that. So that's really fun. So that's one that I did using the Rose Bouquet stamp set. Now here's another version of that where I use the You Make Me Smile stamp set. So this is a more modern rose, a more flowy kind of rose, and this one is a little bit more traditional looking. So that's just two different sample ideas using that same technique. And again, I used something from Doodle Sayings. I used the Hello Friend. Anytime I get a Hello Friend greeting, I have to use it. I love that little saying. And then let me show you another one. So here is a rose bouquet one that I did, and I did this using Tangerine Twist and Red Hot, and then I put it on some Red Hot cardstock. And you can see that the roses here, because of what was underneath, look more like they're ivory than the white. You can see the difference there. So you have to try out a bunch of different colors and see what color yours comes up. So that's another version of that. Then here is, I used the You Make Me Smile set, and for this background I used the Rose Lace background stamp. That's this big one here. And I actually inked up the whole background with just sponging some dusty rose on there, and then I stamped it using faded brick. And then I bleached it, and again this one looks a little bit more ivory, so I stamped my greeting on some ivory cardstock and just cut it out and popped it on there for that one. And then my final one I want to show you, here is another fun way to do it. This one, I used the gauze background, and I stamped that with white. I stamped it with Versamark and used white fine detail embossing powder. And then I just colored it in a little bit using a similar color pencil. This is the Blue Violet Lake. And I just colored some colored pencil around there to define the flowers a little bit more. So that's another one to try on the gauze. Try it with the white embossing powder. So those are my finished card projects, and that was a lot of fun to do. Quick and easy, and it's a really interesting effect. I hope you've enjoyed this technique video. All of the products that I used today in the video are available at simonsaysstamp.com. Thanks so much for joining me today on the Simon Says Stamp blog and YouTube channel, and I'll see you again soon.